On behalf of the APIL leadership, I would like to welcome each and every one of you to our Day 2 General Assembly. That being said, I would like to ask the Honorable Secretary, Senator Saplan, to do the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to everybody. And at this time, I will call the roll. American Samoa, Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands,
Present.
FSM State of Chuuk,
Present.
FSM State of Kosrae, FSM State of Pohnpei,
Present.
FSM State of Yap,
Present.
the island of Guam, Republic of Kiribati, so we see that so Republic of Kiribati present, Republic of the Marshall Islands, you see that it's present, Republic of Nauru, Republic of Palau,
Present.
and the state of Hawaii. Mr. President, we have 8 member entities present and 4 member entities absent.
Thank you, Honorable Secretary, Senator Saplan. It is the tradition of the Pohnpei State Legislature, and since we're in the chamber of the legislature, we'll comply with the tradition. And I would like to ask Honorable Senator Mitaro Simena to please offer our thanksgiving and plea for the guidance of the Holy Spirit for our deliberation of the day.
Allow me to say the prayer. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you and we praise you for this beautiful morning. Thank you for the abundant blessings that you showered upon each and every one of us. We bow this morning to ask the guidance of your Holy Spirit to guide our discussion and deliberations of today. We ask your wisdom, your knowledge throughout the day. Protect us and be with us. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Kalangan. My respect to honorable speakers, 5 speakers, senators, ladies and gentlemen. Our agenda this morning, we will begin with the presentation. And as stated in the booklet, I will call upon the lead presenter to introduce the presenters, and let's proceed.
Buenos and Hafday, Mananas Ituas, many of God's blessings. President Neth, traditional leaders, Secretary Sablan, and all the heads of delegation and members of APIL and the Pohnpei legislatures, and yes, good morning again. My name is Tina Rose Munya Barnes, and I am the Vice Speaker of the Guam Legislature. And I want to share with you that in January of 2021, I introduced a bill to create a transshipment task force. And my team here with me this morning is my Policy and Communications Director, Mr. Shirag Balwani, who will be presenting, along with our good friend, Mr. Charlie Hermosa, who wears a hat as part of the Transshipment Task Force Committee on the island of Guam. We began, ladies and gentlemen, we began looking at ways that we can do to, one, to diversify our economy, and two, to become more resilient to the next pandemic. And I want to share with you that learning from the lessons from COVID, how the global supply chain was disrupted, we looked at ways to innovate and strengthen our economies. So today, my colleagues, you will hear some exciting updates that we have made from the task force, and I hope that we can work together to make this a reality, not only for our island of Guam, but for our entire blue continent. So with that being said, my job is easy, because I'm going to turn it over to the subject matter experts here to share with you what we've done to date and how we can continue to work together in this blue Pacific continent. So, Mr. Shirag?
So, like the Vice Speaker mentioned, Bill 2-36 is now Guam Public Law 36-23, which created the Transshipment Task Force. This task force came about as a result of two papers. One was COVID-19 and its impact on shipping and port sector in Asia Pacific by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific. And the second paper was the impact of COVID-19 on logistics by the International Finance Corporation World Bank Group. What both of these papers studied was how COVID and the disruptions in the shipping industry pretty much shut down a lot of the economic trade in the Pacific, and for a lot of our smaller island nations, it shut down the only interaction they had with the outer world by shutting down their economy, by preventing them from being able to access critical supplies such as food and medicine. You know, this is just not a sustainable way of life. Both these papers created short and long-term goals that needed to be implemented in order to make our supply chain more resilient, and it looked at it for Guam as well as the rest of Micronesia. The second paper by the International Finance Corporation listed out 5 action items, and on Guam we had, thanks to Senator Mary's bill, the digitization of manifest. That was the last action item that we needed to implement in order to be in order to ensure our supply chain was more resilient to the next pandemic. Both these papers highlight, and you know, all of us being from Pacific Island nations, logistics and transshipment can boost competitiveness and stimulate our economic growth, especially since we are emerging markets. And these spillover effects from the vulnerability in the supply chain, we all felt it one way or another, whether it was not being able to access food, critical commodities, medicine, travel. We clearly need to be more resilient, and our proposal is that in order to do this, we can't do it just as Guam. We got to do it together with each and every one of you. The Transshipment Task Force, we secured a grant through the U.S. Economic Development Authority to conduct a feasibility study. The request for proposal for this RFP has gone out, and it's due on October 24th, I believe. once expert is hired through this grant, one of their responsibilities, because the Vice Speaker really wanted to ensure that we help the entire Blue Continent, and economically speaking, it makes more sense if we're all in this together, is that they have to reach out to each and every one of you as regional stakeholders. So we wanted to take the time to give you an idea of what we're trying to do on Guam, just so that when the consultant does reach out to all of you, you have a better understanding of how to respond to them and what exactly we're trying to do. And at this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague and good friend, Charlie Hermosa.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I promise you, and I do a lot better with videos and pictures. So after we get through these slides, we're going to have pictures as far as what we're talking about, because I tend to relate a lot better when I'm able to show a little bit of what we're talking about. So in light of and everything that Chirag has mentioned, well, one of the things that we have been tasked to do is to be able to think outside the box. I know it's a lot easier said than done when we say, okay, what other avenues can we take to be able to diversify our internal economy? How do we get the island nations together in this blue continent concept? The task force really represents one thing. It's the ability to come together and in a collaborative way and create a diverse economic plan that's going to get us for the next 25, 50 to 100 years. I think the way that a lot of the companies, if you look at a lot of the plans that a lot of the major companies had, and you look into what would be the factors that would absolutely shut down their operation, and the one thing in every single plan that you read is the only way that we would stop operation is if the world would ever shut down, right? And nobody ever thought that that would ever happen. Nobody ever thought that the world would completely shut down. When the world shut down, that exposed so many gaps in the supply chain and in the logistics arena, because we were so hard on understanding that every movement, every second, everything has money associated to extra cost, extra time. So just in time was the name that and the phrase that we used across the entire manufacturing world, production, shipping, just in time. Well, that changed because nothing was coming just in time. A lot of the goods that we were getting from off island were having delayed in their internal process to manufacture their own goods. So inventory levels where we used to have distributors, for example on Guam, they had a week's worth of cargo and inventory. The more inventory that you have, the more money is sitting there waiting to go out into the market so that people can purchase. The inventory level started to grow to 2 weeks, to 3 weeks, to 4 weeks, because a lot of the businesses said, I can't afford not to have any products. The dependency for outside was huge. So the task force, one of their main missions is to how do we create and how do we utilize our foothold of where we stand to be able to self-sustain ourselves in a new way of looking at a supply chain? How do we grow our manufacturing, light assembly market? How do we grow our education and workforce development? How do we really self-sustain ourselves for the next 25, 50 to 100 years? These are a couple of the points that we've been talking about, right? A centralized supply chain. I pretty much deal with, I'm the general manager for American President Lines, a shipping company, a global shipping company. And we've been analyzing this. I analyze it in my sleep. I was thinking about it last night. We're always looking at the one thing that COVID did allow us to do is to be able to expand our mind and say, how can we do this differently? How can we do it differently? And I think right now, it's the perfect time for us to be able to look at doing things in a different way. Because I think everybody's open to listening now to how to do things differently. The diverse economic development that we're trying to propose within the transshipment and what it stands for. Again, how do we self-sustain ourselves with creating a light manufacturing, assembly, things that we haven't really talked about in the past. It might have been there, but we really have to put a lot more emphasis on making sure that we make this happen. Regional sustainment, the blue continent, okay? How do we come together to be able to create avenues of development that not only supports one island nation, but it supports the entire blue continent? And that's one of the things that we're trying to be able to promote. Workforce development, I will tell you that this has always been a topic of discussion, and in the next couple of slides, I want to be able to show you that we have a mass exodus across a lot of island nations where people are trying to find work. Our young talent pool, our kids are graduating and then trying to see what their next step is going to be, and they're going off island. So how do we keep them here? How do we keep them engaged to say that you can have a great future here? So the workforce development is something that we really need to be able to focus on, okay? Because we do have the raw talent, we do have the raw materials to be able to create an environment where they can stay here and work on island. So this is the way that we look at the transshipment. It's a whiteboard. It's a whiteboard. The ability for us today to be able to, and Mary, Senator, sorry, I'm going to use your analogy about cooking. Today we stand with all the major ingredients that we need to be able to make a soup. We all know what those ingredients are. We all know what they stand for, but now it's a matter of being able to put them together and see how they work together, and it has to be palatable. It has to taste good. So we know the ingredients, we know how to make the soup, we just got to make it taste good. So the whiteboard stands as a means for us to be able to be creative on how to redesign, number one, our supply chain. When we look at how we've been doing business, and I've spoken to a lot of folks from Palau, Saipan, Marshall Islands, I asked them, how has the logistics been done? And the logistics been done for the same way for the last 25 to 30 years, okay? But we've gone through a pandemic, and I think now it's the time to be able to start redesigning the supply chain, because we can. We have the ability today to work with the shipping companies to redesign a new plan to be able to sustain our ability in the Pacific, okay? So when you look at the Pacific, right, I think that probably 60-70% of the reach goes back to the mainland U.S. What we want to do is we want to be able to create a blue continent where the supply chain lines will self-sustain ourselves in many things that we're trying to look towards. So when we talk about light manufacturing, for example, the Transshipment Task Force is looking at ways to be able to create a light manufacturing assembly, bring in the raw materials into island, creating a product, and then exporting it out. When you look at the economics of shipping, a lot of you probably will ask yourselves, why is the shipping so high? And I will tell you that the shipping is high because, for the most part, it's a one-way trade. It's a one-way trade. So just think about an airplane coming into Pompeii, fully packed, 200 passengers on board, but then it leaves empty with 0 passengers on board. For the airline, what would you think would happen? The economics is, I have to make sure I cover the cost for the round trip, right? So if we're looking at a cost of, say, $10,000 to bring a shipping container in, but if you tell me that I bring in 1 container with raw materials, and then you give me 1 container of finished goods exporting, then the economics gets cut in half. That $10,000 container that usually ships one way, that covers both the round trip, can now be divided into two segments. 5 in, 5 out. So you start looking at the economics of what this can really develop. So one of the things that we're focusing on is being able to establish that concept of being able to bring in raw materials, being able to bring in cargo through our ports, airports, seaports, and then create an environment where we can create exports to balance out that economic unbalance of being able to charge everything on that one-way haul, okay? The infrastructure is also a major part of it, right? We can easily go out and say that we want to be able to get the bigger companies, bigger ships to come in, but we have to have the infrastructure to be able to allow them to come in. Deep drafts, cranes, chassis, the airports, hangars, the infrastructure has to be in place to be able to go after these major and larger companies. So that is a component that we have to look at. But when we look at light manufacturing, the pictures that you're seeing right now is actually something that we just started on Tuesday. On Tuesday, on Guam, we started to light assemble drones. We went after, we were able to get the license, we were able to get permits. We went after a bid to produce the drones, and we won the bid. And now we have to produce 20 drone units, okay? So everything that we've been talking about, the workforce development, the ability to get supply chain, that was all taken into account. So on Tuesday, we had already been talking to 5 people that had been doing just technical work at home. Kids that are putting stuff together. And so we went out and we hired them. So what you see here is the initial onset of the light manufacturing that we're starting to do. We will most likely finish production within the next 2 weeks, and we will have the fully and first made on Guam drone. A lot of people have been saying it's been tough to do, but what we wanted to show was the ability that we can do it, and we can do it. So, interesting conversation earlier is how do we continue to promote that? How do we continue to drive? Like, why would industries look at us to be able to purchase goods from or finished goods? And the clear answer to that is that we don't have to serve a purpose for the entire world, but we can definitely serve a purpose for the region that we're trying to support. What if we made a percentage of what we utilize today in all the island nations? What if we made a percentage of all the finished goods, whether it's technical or finished products here within this region? But we can. We can do that from a technical perspective. And one of the things that we need to show one of the biggest economies, which is the U.S., is the fact that we can do this. And all we need is the support from the U.S. government to say that if you create an environment where you're going to be making and assembling things, then the U.S. has to purchase a percentage of those finished goods from us. A percentage. With that in hand, we can go out to the world and say, we already have a contract. We already have a contract. We have 5%, 10%. It has to be bought from us, and we're going to make it here. When you show this contract across all commercial industries, global industries around the world, that's a different set. When you show up at the door and you go after and you say, well, I'm going to try to see if we can get a contract, it gets a little risky for these companies to come in and invest. But if you show that we have a contract and it says that for the next 10 years, we're going to be making drones, and the U.S. has to purchase at least 5 to 10% of that. It's a game changer for us, because we already know what those 5, 10 years are going to look. The semiconductors, I think, Senator, you've been very heavily moved on this, because now with the task force, what we're doing is we're going through all the industries to be able to kind of promote this environment of raw materials coming in, finished product coming out. How do we utilize the blue continent as a means to be able to come together and develop this new diverse economic plan? Regional sustainment. And this is where it gets a little, we're going to have to keep an open mind about this. But this is where it gets really, I think, fun and exciting. So as you can see from these pictures, most of you, they're drones, correct? One of the things that we're also trying to promote is this internal self-sustainment. And one of the biggest issues that we have seen throughout a lot of the island nations is that we have smaller islands where population range from 50, 100, 200, 300 people. But the logistics to be able to sustain those, it's pretty rough. Whether we're using a small plane, whether we're using a small boat. One of the things that we have started to look at, and really we're on the process of developing, is drone deliveries throughout the island nations. What you see in the middle picture with that white box, we actually have that box in Palau. We moved this box down in Palau so that we could test the ability to deliver goods with drones in areas that they would normally not be able to receive goods other than via plane or boat. These drones can fly. The one that we're testing out, the white drone on the right hand, that one can fly for 4 hours. It can go out to about 200 miles. The one we're looking at it can fly for 10 hours, and it can go out to about 600 miles. So when you start thinking about delivering medicine, delivering life-saving items, we have the technology to be able to put something in place that will allow us to service our people, 1,000%. And we're going to continue with this plan to see where these models also work throughout the region, where areas that you would normally not be able to get it to easily. With the drone technology, we will be able to service every single island, as small as it is, whether it's a box of Tylenol, Pampers, baby formula, blood, anything that would be needed in order to sustain and provide everybody the means to be able to survive. So the other aspect is that we've been working on is it's tough to get an address. So we've been working with a company that's developed an address system that it's divided the entire world into a 3x3 square. And every square gets 3 words to it. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is come up with a way to be able to work with local legislation, with the postmasters, to designate these 3 words to homes. You could be living under a tree. You could be living under a tin hut. You could be living in a hotel. You could be living in an apartment, in a house. You could be in the middle of the water, living on a boat. It doesn't matter where you're at. Every square has 3 words associated to it. And for example, in Palau when we were down there, we tested it out. And as long as those 3 words were there, the deliveries and the drones will recognize every single position that you're at, wherever you're at. You don't need to recreate, you don't need to come up. You want to order something from Amazon, you want to order anything from Walmart, you give them these 3 words. You have a designator as far as the position that you're located. At the hotel, at the 3-star hotel, those are my 3 words. I did it last night. I said, what are my 3 words? I popped it up. Construct, build, and rehab. I don't know why rehab was. It's random, so it doesn't, there's no rhyme or reason for that. But It's an algorithm that provides you with 3 words. If I wanted a delivery made to the hotel, I just give the system those 3 words and knows exactly where I'm at. So you don't have to provide an address, you don't have to say, go down the street, make a right, go left, you'll see a house, the store. You don't have to give GPS coordinates, okay? It's just these 3 words. That's it, just these 3 words. So, again, being able to think forward-looking as far as how to be able to sustain ourselves internal. And this is another avenue of what we're trying to look at across the board. Workforce development. So one of the things that we've launched as well, and part of the meetings that we've had in the task force, the workforce development, is how do we train our people? And again, using technology, we've launched a virtual reality system. So basically what we do is I can jump into this virtual reality world where we could actually be here right now, but we're really not. I can teach you virtually. I can show you how to maneuver, assemble. I mean, doctors are using this now, where doctors could be in Korea performing operations in California virtually. So they're there physically, and they have hands that they're maneuvering right on the operating table. So do we have this technology today? Yeah, we do. We're starting that. And we're starting with the younger generation, the 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds. These kids are impressive. The technology, the way they think, the way they maneuver is very beyond what we will ever experience. So the workforce development and education is also a big component of the task force, is because it can't just be things that we want to do, because we got to be able to execute it. And in order for us to be able to execute it, we need the manpower and the people behind it. So it may sound crazy, but it's really not. Because right now, crazy was COVID shutting down the world, because we never really thought that was ever going to happen. And that's it for our presentation. I will leave you with this. Right now, it's the best opportunity for us to be able to come together as one blue continent and really promote all the aspects that we represent geographically, culturally, and we can actually self-sustain ourselves with the ability to be able to produce things that we need and diverse our economy. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Charlie. And with that presentation being done, again, as brothers and sisters of our island nations, and though the waters may separate us, it's through our traditions and values and what we believe in that continue to bind us together as one. And when the task force was meeting, we wanted to make sure that if it's good for Guam, it should be good and work closely with the islands so that we all can come together. And Charlie talked about education and training, and those are the opportunities that we're looking at. We're in a generation where we have to turn over the leadership to the younger generation because they're up and coming. So when that RFP went out, I know the closing is October 24th. We know that whoever the consultant is, they're going to come out and reach out to the islands to do that study. And we wanted to make sure that you had an idea of what is being said and what is being done. And we hope that all our islands can prosper together and know that if we think that it's impossible to do something, all we need to do is step out of that comfort zone, get creative, and look at ways to bring everybody back together. And COVID literally opened the minds of all of us, because we thought for 1 second, how much longer are we going to live if everything is shut down? So, Mr. President, on behalf of the task force and the committee on hand and the chairmanship of Mr. Charlie and Mr. Shirag in the different task force committees. I want to extend my thank yous and open up for any questions that you may have for the subject matter experts. And I open the floor, if that's okay with you, Mr. President. Or are we out of time?
My regret that it is not okay, but it is perfect. Q&A for a few minutes.
Senator Garrett.
Senator Torres?
Yes. Thank you, Charlie, for that briefing. What I'm not understanding right now is what would be the initial investment or buy-in for all of the regions? Is there an expected investment or like what component of risk is involved here if everyone were to buy into the transshipment model?
Right, and that's one of the things that we've been trying to look at because there is an investment. I think right now, with what Chirag had said, is the RFP that went out for the consultant to come on board is really to do the majority of the fact finding to be able to guide us in the direction that we need to go. So right now, the risk, I would say, is we're trying to minimize it because we're not actually putting the plan out for people to start investing and creating infrastructures. But we want really is the time and the ability for us to really come together as a group, understand the concept and the vision, and I would say that's the risk. The risk is really just thinking that we can't do this. Yep, good.
Just to add to that is, some of the work that the consultant will do is, the consultant that we've sought out in the RFP is somebody who thoroughly understands logistics, but also international maritime law of the different countries that are here, different jurisdictions. We all have different laws, and so the consultant that we're seeking out, it's their job, or they're anticipated to know all these different international maritime laws. And what we really are asking from each and every one of you is just whoever the consultant is, once they're picked, please seriously sit down with them because they need each and every one of your input because you guys understand your jurisdictions better. You guys understand the challenges of your local jurisdictions and the rising cost of living, and that's really what we're trying to address. And like Charlie mentioned, the economies are just not of scale right now, and so if we all come together, it would raise the volume and kind of make it cheaper for us. And if it's cheaper for us and we can make it cheaper for you, I hope we can work together and you guys just meet with whoever the consultant is.
And if I may, just a follow-up comment, my thought is that if in fact the oceans connect us and not divide us, then perhaps transshipment is a feasible model for all of our island nations.
Oh, absolutely, and also the risk also, Senator, could be the fact that we kind of keep doing status quo, and that's the one thing we want to be able to push through.
Oh, you are.
Sorry, just to reiterate on the point that His Excellency, the President of FSM made yesterday, for the need to include Kiribati and Nauru in that health study. Mind me, forgive me for I have a hearing problem, so I missed most of the presentation you made today. But talking about the islands, is Kiribati and Nauru included in the transshipment task force study that's being undertaken? I just missed the whole of it, but
Yes, so they're included. They are included within the RFP. So the study includes the entire region.
Thank you very much for that. It would be interesting if we can have a copy of the report so that we can work on it when we go back. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Let me interrupt. Let me ask Sergeant, escort Chuk, Senate President, the Vice President of APIL, to his seat. He's sitting right there. Proceed. Nan Margu from RMI.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'm not Margi, but thank you for the temporary title. Before I proceed with my my intervention, I just want to once again thank FSM for the great hospitality, especially State of Pohnpei. And one word I learned when I first got here, my first time here in Pohnpei, was Kazlilye. And then last night I learned Sakawala. But Mr. President,
You're doing good.
Mr. President, I just want to ask Charlie. I really support and RMI support the innovation, and most of us, if not maybe all of us, talking about Blue Continent, we're members of the PNA, Parties of No Agreement, and we have very limited surveillance. But having the drone, I think it might help. So can you point us, or how we can utilize that project of the drone as far as surveillance or even search and rescue? A lot of our people lose their life every year because they're traveling from one island to other using, either traditional way of transport on water or other means. So can you enlighten us with how your project is going to help with search and rescue, and also what you call it, the surveillance? Sorry. Thank you.
Yep, no, absolutely. And one of the, one of the areas that we were able to actually go in was Palau about almost a year and a half ago. And what we wanted to do was sort of take the model that we've been working on Guam and see if it applies to the different island nations, and they do. Surveillance, search and rescue, lost hikers, swimmers, hunters, those are all things that we've been trying to see how we can combat, because even in Tumban Bay, when the water recedes, and we've had people drown almost in 2 feet, 3 feet of water. But the ability to be able to get something out to them very quickly and efficiently is where the drone technology comes in. The other big component is, how do we work with all the smaller outer islands, and how do we deliver goods, medicine, food, and normally, probably we're putting it on small boats. Fuel is really high. It takes about 30 minutes to an hour, but the drones can do the same type of delivery within minutes, and they're electrical, so they're not using so much as fuel to be able to deliver. So we would like to explore and really have the opportunity to discuss with all the island nations to see how we can create these plans for all the islands, to see how we can implement programs that would allow them to efficiently manage search and rescue, deliveries, and just being able to provide them with those means. So we want to have that opportunity to have the conversation with the island nations that are willing to listen. So we really appreciate the fact that you're thinking that way, because it makes sense, right? When you look at it, it makes sense how we can use technology in the efforts of what we're doing today. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for thinking that way.
Any more? President of Palau.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Vice Speaker, for the wonderful presentation. It kind of brings me some hopes when I see that, by taking such an approach, we can surely that price of goods will, maybe hopefully we'll cut it in half as we are compared to what we're experiencing this today. But my question will be in regards to the labor force for this region. One of the challenges that for Palau, for example, one of the challenges we're facing is because of our wages in Palau that is not competitive enough compared to the U.S. And because of our relationship with the United States under the Compact of Free Association, we travel freely and reside freely in the United States, where wages are much higher, almost 3 times or 4 times what Palau can offer to its citizens. That's why we see all this, brain drain in Palau. So my question is how you approach that with competitive wages that now these regions, including Palau, is facing. And then comes to the end product of anything we manufacture on island. One of the examples we faced in Palau was the garment factory that came in and established in Palau. And because of the the wages in Palau are much higher than a lot of the Asian countries, they did work in Palau for some time, but they realized that they're not making as much as they would have if they had moved out to the Asian countries. So they moved. So, we ended up with nothing, empty buildings, big buildings standing there, So I love the concept, and I'm facing this challenge where how do we attract investors in terms of our wages, and how do we attract our labor force to maintain staying on island when the U.S. is much more attractive. Recently, we have about 200 government workers. They're doing great in the government. They resigned and went to U.S. just recently. And this is because of the opening up of a new approach by most of the U.S. companies, because they're having a hard time getting labor from South America and because of visa issues. So they created this organization that comes to Palau and recruit workers. So now they're filling up different companies in U.S. by our citizens because of the. So that's where my mind got stuck on when you were talking about the approach of developing.
Yep. No. And I think we need to be able to look at those things that have happened in the past as learning experience, and so that we can ask the right questions. Because the number one question that always gets asked is, why, if we make something in this region, what is going to push the world to buy it from us? What is the demand? Why are they going to come? Why do they want to set up shop here? But when we showed up the blue continent map, when we're looking at it, what we're saying is there's a portion that needs to be carved out because we can actually create it for ourselves. Okay, so the example, if we can go back and use the eyeglasses, and this is just an example. Why can't we create the glasses that everybody uses here and support our region in a way? Because right now we're buying them, but we're buying them made everywhere else. So there's an internal demand already that's created. Everybody needs eyeglasses. So the ability for us to be able to make for our region is number one. And then number two, as the buildup continues, the incentives, as we get more craftsmanships developed, the demand will be created. With the military, when we're talking with the military today, we have a lot of ships out here. And they stop in different countries, Singapore, Philippines, and they get their goods and they get their repair parts. We sometimes fly a lot of the repair parts from the mainland U.S. over to Singapore. But if we carve out and we say, I can make those same repair parts here, you don't have to go back to the U.S. I will support you in everything that you do from this region. I will support you. What do you need? You need eyeglasses? I got them. You need a fuel pump? I got it. But we're not buying, we're not transporting it from the mainland, because that's what we do with a lot of our spare parts, right? We buy them offshore, we bring them back here, we stock them, something breaks, we pull it, we fix it, it goes back. No, what we're trying to say is the process starts here. The process starts here. So if you need something, glasses, I'm going to make them. The technology of 3D printing. I just got a demonstration last week on these large, they could probably 3D print me. I don't know if you want that, but I'm just saying, like, it won't be a lot because I'm a lot shorter, so like a lot of the material, but the ability to 3D print now it's amazing. So that old mindset of manufacturing where you have these big giant machines and technical, no, it's more technical. The machines now can produce everything just in one 3D print. So like when we look at these glasses, the way, when you look at this, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you have 6 components into these glasses. What the 3D printing is doing one. It prints the whole thing out. It saves on cost. It saves on production. And then you really just have to add the eyeglasses to it. So that's sort of the vision of when we're talking about manufacturing. Manufacturing, we also have to turn the page on what we used to think manufacturing was. So when we look at the demand, we can create that demand because we can support the U.S. government, the military. But we can also help ourselves, we can support ourselves on making the things that we need to be able to survive, just normally. I hope that answered your question. And so on the workforce development, that's a big topic. And one of the things that we've started to do is create these programs at the grammar school level, the kids that are 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And the one thing that we're trying to promote is the fact that we need to create avenues where they see that, am I going to go into working in the hospitality industry? Am I going to go into the military? But I like to play video games and I love computers and I like to do the technical stuff. So what is there for me to do that I can have a passion to do? And that's the driver of what we're trying to create. So when we look at paying jobs, the one thing that I say is we don't want to compete with China on making t-shirts. That's not what we want to compete against. We'll never compete. That force is very, the margins are super slow. We want to be able to go into looking at making things that have higher margins, technical stuff, medicine, pharmaceuticals. So when we're looking at our workforce, we're looking at a workforce that's getting paid well because they're doing things that are high-paying things. So, for example, I had a meeting with a friend who's an investor as well. He was on his way to Thailand, and I thought he worked for a pharmaceutical. They make the ball joints for the pharmaceuticals. I thought he was going to Thailand to visit his plant. But he came to Guam, we had great dinner, and I said, "Are you going to your plant in Thailand?" And he said, "No." I said, "Where is your plant? Like, where's your manufacturing plant?" He's like, "Where do you think it is?" I said, "The normal things, like China, where is it?" He's like, "No," he's like, "It's in LA." I said, "LA? I mean, you want to talk about the cost of living, high wages?" And what he said was, he said, "No, I have no problem finding a workforce because the money's there, the margins are there, I can pay my people well. I'm not paying these people to make something that's not, not high paying." So wages is number one. How do we keep our people happy? But also creating the environment for our next generation to understand that we're creating something that's going to be there for them to be able to pay. So we can do it. I mean, if we're doing manufacturing ball joints in LA where minimum average home there is like $1.2 million, we can definitely do it in many, many other places.
Very inspiring, so thank you.
Chair recognizes CNMI.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I just want to share that what caught my attention is when the part where you said, you'll be here and I'll be there, and you can tell me what to do over the network or something. It's similar to the resolution that we have, the CNMI has. It deals with broadband. So that's good. I think we are in the same mind level, so.
That's
Thank you.
actually, that actually definitely, they go hand in hand.
Yes.
Because we want to be able to use that resource as a means to be able to develop. So I honestly think a lot of the telecom companies have, I made a statement a couple of weeks back that they were like, what? But in my opinion, you know, the cell phones will be obsolete within the next 3 to 5 years. And we're really going to get into more of being able to work in this virtual reality world that we're all going into. So it's coming, and we're working on that technology, and the infrastructure is getting put in place so that we're all able to look at virtual reality where we don't have to physically be here, but we can do education programs from all over the world. We did it today. We're doing it with Zoom. Whoever would have thought, right, that's how we would be able to communicate. But the next level is really that world.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
You can have as many questions as you can and you wish, but you have only 2 minutes.
thank you, Mr. President. My question is in line with the transshipment task force, that the initiative of the transshipment task force. My question is in line with the labor and workforce. You mentioned about manufacturing and the challenges. For example, the cost of shipment. Is there any consideration, for example, in Micronesia, we are facing the inflation and the cost of, the imports of goods, and that's my question. I just want
Yeah.
to relate to that.
Yeah, and that's one of our major topics, is the shipping. But remember what we talked about is when you look at the economics of how the shipping companies look at when they move cargo, it's one way. It's just imports coming in. There's nothing going out. So the easiest way maybe we can look at it is if, let's just say there's a container box of imports coming in, and it's $10,000. But there's nothing going out. So the company has to charge the round trip of being able to work that. But if you say that you're bringing in raw materials for manufacturing 1 box in, and then you have a finished product 1 box out, now that round trip is divided into 50%. So it's 5,000, 5,000. So it really is, how do we find the economic balance with imports and exports? So right now, everything that we do is pretty much we import, and we're really not doing any exports. So the economics is really simple, right? It's like you bring in a plane full of passengers, 200 passengers coming in, but the airline, they're not going to pay for the plane going back empty. They charge it on all the tickets that they have to, because it's a round trip ticket. The same thing that's happening in the mainland U.S. right now with the trucking situation. A lot of the truckers there today are before they could give you a great rate to pick it at the warehouse in Texas, and they wouldn't charge you the round trip. But now they can't get anything back, so now they're charging us a round trip. I'm going to charge you for going to pick it up, and then I'm going to charge you for bringing back nothing. So that added, it multiplied the cost 100%. So if we can find a balance between import and exports, that's really what's going to drive the economics of being able to bring down the shipping costs significantly. Does that make sense, or?
Thank you. The Q&A. Okay. Recognizes the treasurer of the APIL board.
Thank you very much. Sorry I didn't catch the beginning, but I've read a bit about the task force, the bill, the law. This is one of the things that's very important to us. For us, it's about the fishing vessels transshipment hub. And my colleague, the delegation from Kiribati has mentioned the need for connectivity between Kiribati, Nauru, and the rest of APIL. And I mean, it's a very good initiative for Guam to develop the transshipment industry and to try and service that. For us, it's for the fishing vessels. And if you're going to have that as part for the Pacific and to maybe supply our transshipment hub and maybe the Marshall Islands, all of us at the PNA, the parties to the Nauru Agreement, how can we get that link from Guam to Kiribati? I think that's an ongoing issue that we've brought up to APIL at the General Assembly in Christmas Island in Kiribati. There was also a resolution to try and connect medicine to Kiribati. So that's a very good initiative, but how can we benefit from it? Thank you.
So the one thing that I just want to make sure that, and as the Senator mentioned, I am the general manager for American President Line, so we compete against Matson. Okay, we compete against Matson. But when it comes to the task force, you know, I take my hat off. It's not about APL, it's about the region. But I will share with you is that what you said is exactly true. Because whenever we look at exports, and from a company perspective, from a shipping company perspective, we're always looking to see how we can balance that import-export. Because in order for me to be able to offer aggressive and low rates, we have to be able to balance the cost. So if I'm bringing one box in, how can I get one box out? And in this region, the one thing that always pops up is the fisheries. Fish is being exported, and so when we looked at the economics, and we looked at the different geographical island nations that are really exporting, fisheries comes in here, they load them, freeze them into containers, they get loaded onto the ship, and then off they go to the different markets. The way we are looking at the region right now is that we would have, it's more of a dedicated service that we would look at. So we would actually keep the ships within this region running through and connecting to the different points through different major hubs that will be created, whether it's Saipan, whether it's Guam, anything. But there has to be a dedicated service that runs through all the island nations, kind of collecting and doing and then coming back up, and all kind of funneling through one feeder service. One feeder service. So when I put up that picture of the whiteboard, it's because let's redesign it. Let's really put together, because we're looking at it every day. We already know what kind of ships we want to bring into the region. We're looking at a schedule of how the stops would look like. We just need to make sure that the economics because it's supporting the region, but it's still a business. So we still need to be profitable as well, right? So that's the balance that we have to look for. But if we can bring in one and get one out, or maybe 0.5 out, that will work. We've done the economics. We've tried to get good numbers on the amount of containers of fish that are leaving the region, and they're healthy on a weekly, monthly level. You know, you're looking at 200, 300, 400 containers of fish every month. And so if we can collectively look at and create a specific lane that would kind of gather that, we could create a new service that would just service this region. They would have the container ships just kind of running around, and then funnel into a feeder service that would create that environment. So to answer your question, is it doable? Absolutely. It's very doable, because I've looked at it, and we are so eager to see how we can put this thing together, because we want to be able to service, we want to be able to come back to the region. Because we were here at one point. We were here almost 30, 40 years ago. And so we want to be able to come back.
We all thank Vice Speaker and our colleague presenters. Let's give them a round of applause. Q&A continues until they board their flights, return to Guam. Okay, I will ask for introductions. We're not on break. The chair has not declared any break yet. Senator Andrew, take your seat. Okay. First introduction, I would like to have the honor to ask the Vice Speaker of Pohnpei State Legislature to introduce Mrs. Roxanne Stephen. She's from Kitty, so he wants to have the honor for the
Kalangan, Mr. President, Vice President, presiding officers, and my colleagues, members of the APIL in this 39th General Assembly. I wish to propose that we acknowledge some of the important people of Pohnpei being with us this morning. Let me begin with the Speaker of the 10th Pohnpei Legislature, Speaker Yamaguchi. Senator Johnson, representing the island of Maquilo. Senator Apis, representing the island of Benguelap. Senator Apis, representing the beautiful town of Colonia, the center of Pohnpei. Senator Sandalina Lega, representing the beautiful island of Nuguro. Senator Ricky Carl, representing the municipality of Madelinium, the guardian of Nanmatol. And let me go back to the southern part of Pohnpei, my beautiful municipality of Kitri. To begin with, let me introduce Senator Takarti Daniel, representing Kitri Municipality. Last but not the least, I'm very pleased and fortunate to introduce a very special woman born and raised in my very own municipality. All great men, they are them the greatest woman. The wife, the spouse of the President of Chuk State Legislature and the Vice President of this APIL. I am pleased to introduce Madame Roxanne Stephen. She's from Tian Village, Kitri Municipality, from the Manuel family. Tian Village, where I told you that all rains running around in Pohnpei, when it goes out from Pohnpei, that's the village where those rains leave Pohnpei, going out. So, Madam, thank you very much. I am proud to introduce you this morning. On behalf of all the good citizens of Kitri. Kalangan, Kirisau Chabur. Kalangan, Mr. President.
Kailangan, let me briefly introduce Honorable Consul General Diego Benavente.
Mr. President, not only Diego, Lucan Tululang Kitri, that's a high traditional title.
Thank you. Saving the best, I have the honor and privilege to introduce Madam President of the Pohnpei Women Council and also the Director of the Administration for the FSM Supreme Court, and the list goes on with the high titles. The Chief of Staff for Senator Ricky Carl. I have the honor to introduce Emiliana Moshrashrik Carola. Madam President of the ITP, let me introduce you again and thank you. And thank you for bringing our lady from Pohnpei, from Awak, USA, Rosa. Senator Andrew, Chair authorizes for break until 3 in the afternoon. No, I'm just kidding. A few minutes before 11, when U.S. congressmen will come in on this room. And at the same time for Secretary and Central Secretariat for APIL to organize the resolutions and for us to consider. Thank you all. Let's enjoy the break. Speaker Vincent Figuer, go to the booth. The booth in the back.
Got your boy back again. You know how we do. This for the summer of 2013, baby. I'm still representing 691, yo. Play this for you. Be like, damn. Hey, juvenile. We didn't get so
Bilang mas kalaraniaya O birongin lang kisiniyanga O binilokin ng mata Leche pinusumara O pichupekan Carros O pinen kerekoro O pimen pir carros Hiyaw depensan pa Bilang mas kalaraniaya O birongin lang kisiniyanga O binilokin ng mata magabigadalang o samba Kachigiyang odabakaro Ziyay melelang pangiyongay Karayang ay bangkin nanjiyang Tangginan kiganengana Limpakong mechikan o karakara Sanggarus kuburan gauno Di magabigadalang o samba Pachigiyang agabakaro Siyay melelang pangiyongan Karayang ay bangkin nanjiyang Bangkinan kiganengana Limpakong